Hello and welcome to Vedic Astrology for Beginners video playlist. My name is Elena, I'm a professional Vedic astrologer, and in this video series, I teach you how to read your birth chart step by step. On my channel, I talk a lot about transits, forecasts, astrology, zodiac signs, celebrity birth charts. So if you're interested in this, then be sure to subscribe to my channel. In this video, we're going to talk about the third whale of the birth chart, the 12 houses. Previous videos in this series covered other birth chart basics, like how to read and build your Vedic astrology birth chart, what are the planets that we're looking at in Vedic astrology, and what are the meanings of each of the 12 zodiac signs. If you're new to Vedic astrology and you don't know how to build and read your birth chart, be sure to check out the first video in this series. You're also going to need it in order to apply the information I'm sharing in this video to your birth chart. If you're completely new to astrology and you don't know what the difference is between the Vedic astrology and the commonly known Western sun sign astrology, then be sure to check out my video where I talk about the differences between these two systems to get a deeper look. Before we move on to the individual meanings of each of the 12 houses of the birth chart, let's first look at a few basic pieces of information that will help you understand what the houses are and think about them in a very structured and systemic way. Firstly, we previously discussed that if planets are the what or the who in the birth chart, the zodiac signs are the how, meaning the characteristics through which the planets express in the birth chart, then that would make houses the where, because the houses of the birth chart are the areas of your life which get the influence from the planets in the birth chart, positive or negative influence. Now, it's important to understand what the houses actually are before we move on. All 12 houses together capture the 360 degrees of the night sky. They form a sort of grid or canvas on which the planets find themselves along the zodiac sign sphere. One house is a 1/12th section of the grid that captures the night sky and is equal to 30 degrees. Now, we know that the zodiac sign belt also equals 360 degrees, and with there being 12 zodiac signs, just like there are 12 houses, each zodiac sign also equals 30 degrees. This means that in Vedic astrology, one house equals one zodiac sign. So the borders of the house of the birth chart equally align with each of the zodiac signs. That would mean that if you have your first house in Taurus, then your second house would equal the section of the night sky that is Gemini, third Cancer, so on and so forth. It's important to note that while the planets and the zodiac signs are the cosmic reference point because they're the physical objects that we can observe in the sky, the houses are an earth reference point, and they are conditional because they are tied to our viewpoint of the night sky from Earth. Think of it like a grid that grounds the night sky for our understanding from Earth. But how do you know where to start reading the chart from? Which house is the first, second, and so on? How do the houses correspond with the zodiac sign? Well, this is where the details such as the birth time and the birth location become very important, because the first house coincides with the zodiac sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the time that you were born. For this reason, if you have two people who are born at the exactly the same moment in time, but one in Canada, another one in Malaysia, their birth charts will be different because one might be born with a Leo rising chart, while another one born at that same moment might have a Capricorn rising birth chart because a different zodiac sign was aligned with the eastern horizon at that time in that location. Likewise, if you have two people who are born in the same town on the same date, but maybe a couple of hours apart, their birth charts will also be different because the zodiac sign that was aligned with the eastern horizon when the second person was born would have already been changed to the one where the first one was born. And while that doesn't seem like a significant enough change, what it does is it sets the first house to a different zodiac sign, therefore changing the pattern of the planets, how they influence the house or the areas of your life, as well as what connections they make with one another, something we're going to cover in the later videos of this series. Now let's come back to the cardinal direction and houses of the birth chart viewpoint. Here's a very easy way to orient yourself in the birth chart. The top diamond is the first house, and it coincides with the eastern cardinal direction. This is the point of the sunrise. The houses of the birth chart move in a counterclockwise direction from the first house. Therefore, the top triangle on the left side is the second house. The next triangle to it is the third house, and the left diamond becomes the fourth house, coinciding with the northern direction, and the nadir, the point directly below us. Like so, fifth house moves on from the fourth in the clockwise direction until they get back all the way to the first house. But what's important to distinguish here is that the seventh house is the sunset point, opposite from the sunrise point, the first house, and it signifies the western direction, while the 10th house is the zenith point, or the point of the sky directly above us. It coincides with the 10th house, it's opposite from the fourth, and it is the southern cardinal direction. If all of this is a little bit too much to remember, the easy way to always be able to read a Vedic astrology birth chart is to remember that the top diamond is the first house, and from there, houses follow in the counterclockwise succession. The next thing I would like to cover here is that just like the zodiac signs, the houses also have different classifications. Let's briefly look at the main ones. The houses 1, 4, 7, and 10, which we've already talked about and are very familiar with, are the angle houses of the birth chart. And they get their name because they kind of find themselves in the angles, and they're the foundational life areas. These are considered to be good houses, and whenever planets find themselves in them, it usually gives them a lot of support. However, for the houses themselves, it's better if only natural benefics like Jupiter and Venus find themselves in the angle houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. The next category is the trine houses, and these are houses 1, 5, and 9. They get their name because the shape they form in the birth chart represents a triangle. These are considered the absolute best houses of the birth chart, and it's really great if the natural benefics like Jupiter and Venus find themselves in these houses. The third category is upachaya, or growth houses, and these include houses 3, 6, and 11. Now, these aren't really bad houses, but you definitely can't call them good either, because these are the houses that push the person to show effort, initiative, to struggle, develop, and grow, which is oftentimes uncomfortable. And for this reason, they're called the growth houses. It is considered the best when the naturally malefic planets like Mars and Saturn find themselves in these houses, and they're set to help the person show effort, show initiative, and achieve a lot of success over time. The fourth category is trick houses, which are otherwise called dusthanas, and these include houses 6, 8, and 12. These are the problematic houses in Vedic astrology Jyotish, and they're connected to the less desirable life experiences, crises, problems, losses, things of that nature. Planets that find themselves or associate themselves with houses 6, 8, and 12 bring the times of hardship into our lives. So it is considered best when these houses are left empty and don't have any planetary occupants. The last house category is Marakas, and these are houses 2 and 7. Now, these are considered to be neutral in their meanings. However, during the time periods of the planets that are associated with the second or seventh house, a person can fall ill, have any health issues, or may even pass away. Now, if you find a lot of planets in houses 2 and 7, don't worry, and definitely don't start planning your untimely demise. There's definitely a lot more that needs to be happening other than planets placed in houses 2 and 7 to bring the event of death or even a serious illness to a person. Now that we have a good understanding of what the houses are and what categories they fall into, let's look at each of the individual meanings of each house in the birth chart. First house. This is the foundation and the most important house of any birth chart. This is the house that represents yourself, your body, your health, your energy levels, your character, values, and beliefs. The zodiac sign that fits the first house is the sign that would describe your core characteristics, personality, and even to a degree influence your appearance. That being said, if you have any planets that find themselves in your first house, you may notice that you resonate a lot with their characteristics and they are almost very personal to you. If you don't know the characteristics of the planets yet, then be sure to check out the second video of this series where I talk about each planet in detail. In the following videos of this series, we will talk about planetary lordships and how planets interact with one another. However, the one thing that is important to note now is that the planet that rules the zodiac sign, which finds itself in your first house, becomes a very important planet for you, and it is referred to as the Lagna or Ascendant Lord and your entire birth chart ruler. We will be covering which planets rule which zodiac signs in the later videos of this series, but to give an example here, let's say you are a Cancer rising. Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon, which would make the moon the very important planet for you, your Lagna or Ascendant Lord, and your chart ruler. Or let's say you are a Capricorn rising. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so this would make Saturn the most important planet for you, your chart ruler, and your Ascendant Lord. Now, if the chart ruler is well placed in your birth chart and it doesn't have any malefic associations, this is considered to be excellent for indications of the first house and for the chart overall, and can mean that you might enjoy good health and be a very talented and multifaceted personality overall. The same applies also to the first house itself. So if it is influenced by the benefic planets like Jupiter or Mercury that doesn't have negative associations, then this is typically a very good support for the first house, for the person, and for their life overall. Before we go on, it's important that I introduce a very important concept to you, and this concept is called abstract horoscope. In Vedic astrology, you may notice that the zodiac sign meanings have some relevance to the houses of the birth chart. And to understand this relation and these similarities, there is a concept of an abstract horoscope or an abstract birth chart. An abstract horoscope is an Aries rising chart where the first house coincides with the first zodiac sign Aries, the second house coincides with the second zodiac sign Taurus, third house with third sign Gemini, and so on. Now, I will be referencing abstract horoscope and these zodiac sign and house counterparts moving forward, so we form easier associations with each of the houses of the birth chart. Like so, the first house's zodiac sign counterpart is Aries, and it's important to know that the first house is both an angle and a trine house. Moving on to the second house of the birth chart, which shares many of the meanings of the second zodiac sign, Taurus. The second house of the birth chart is most commonly known as the house of finances and resources. It should be noted that the second house is not the only financial house in the birth chart, and the money that the second house is associated with is more along the savings, capital, net worth, family money, and collectibles, possessions kinds of finance. Second house is also a house of family, more specifically the family that you're born into, both parents as a union, which is important to distinguish because there are houses that are individually associated with the mother and the father. Biologically, the second house represents a person's face and all of the organs and features that are on your face, your mouth, your eyes, ears, eyebrows, nose. And for this reason, the meanings of the second house are everything that has to do with these organs of senses. For example, second house also represents our nutrition, our eating habits, as well as our speech and our oral communication. This is also the house that is connected to our physical side and our vision, both physical vision, but also intuitive and imaginative vision. If the second house has influences from a planet like Venus or unaffected Mercury, this can be really good for a person's finances, for their ability to be very eloquent and be a good communicator. But if you don't have any planets in your second house, or if you have only malefics like Saturn and Rahu, don't get too worried. This doesn't mean that you won't have money or you won't have possessions. There's other things, indicators and methods that we use in Vedic astrology to be able to understand a person's financial standing in a lifetime. This is going to be something that we will in part cover in the next videos of this series. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to do so now so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Moving on to the third house, which is easily the most versatile house of the entire birth chart, a feature that it shares with its zodiac sign counterpart, Gemini. Biologically, both Gemini and the third house represent your hands, and this gives a lot of clues into the meanings of the third house. The third house is the house of initiative, of effort, of rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. Think of the third house as an anti-laziness or self-starter house, because if it's initiative and self-starter means, this is also the house of entrepreneurship. But outside of that, third house has a whole wide array of meanings. One of them is creativity, although it is not the only creative house in the birth chart. The creativity that is related to the third house is mostly things that you can do with your hands, like writing, designing, taking pictures, playing musical instruments, doing pottery, or anything else that you can do with your hands in this doing something out of nothing kind of way. So for this reason, people who have a very strong or dominant third house with a lot of placements in it are typically very good with their hands, both in the way that they can fix anything, or they can make anything, or they can learn how to do a wide variety of things. Since one of the meanings of the Gemini zodiac sign is learning, this is also a meaning that is attributed to the third house. And third house learning is very quick, practical learning, something that informs what a person is already doing. These could be practical skills like learning how to use AI, or learning how to edit your videos, or things of that nature. This isn't your philosophical or higher learning, but rather something that is very applied for a person to be able to carry out an activity. Third house is also a house of acting and performance arts. For this reason, you might find that many of the actors have a very interesting third house. It's either strong or it has really good connections in the birth chart. One of the other domains of the third house is communication, specifically written communication, which is why this is a house that is very important for writers, bloggers, content creators, journalists, editors, translators, and anybody in the communications industry. Another meaning of the third house is what in Sanskrit is called prana, and the closest translation to this is physical energy. For this reason, third house is also related to sports and yoga, specifically the physical aspect of it, yoga asanas. Some of the other meanings include short-term trips, sexuality, as well as a person's siblings, notably younger siblings. Examining the third house, what influences it gets, good or bad, would also give insight into all of these things and would also be able to tell you whether a person has any siblings, and if they do, what kind of relationship they have, whether their sibling is a source of joy or sorrow in their life. Now, because the third house requires a person to show up, roll up their sleeves, and get things done, it is considered one of the growth houses, and it's better when malefic planets like Mars, Saturn, Rahu, or Ketu find themselves in the third house. Next up, we have the fourth house, and this house indicates the things that are very near and dear to our heart. Fourth house zodiac association is Cancer, and like Cancer, the fourth house is home to our feelings, emotions, our sense of overall happiness and satisfaction with life. Fourth house is an angle house, and like all angles, fourth house and their meanings are foundational to a person's life. Fourth house includes both our home, like a place where we live in, property we own, but also a place that forms our roots, our neighborhood, our hometown, even our motherland. The condition of the fourth house and its lord will reveal quite a bit about a person's mother. What is she like? What is the relationship like with the person and their mother? And whether in broad strokes, she has a good or a bad life. If the fourth house has many negative influences, this can show a person who is never satisfied, who can never be happy with something, and also a person who is likely to leave their home and move abroad or to a different town. Fifth house is known as first and foremost the house of children, but it has many other meanings. It's important to think about the fifth house as the house of creativity, because creating humans or children is the most amazing and godlike act of creativity that is available to us humans. But fifth house also means other creative pursuits, like authorship of things, authorship of courses, materials, books, music, or anything else. The creative association of the fifth house also clicks in when you think about its zodiac sign counterpart, Leo, a very creative and expressive sign, a quality it shares with the fifth house. One of the other forms of creativity that are very fifth house are drama and performance. Fifth house is also a house of intellect and intellectual pursuits, and this is one of the reasons why fifth house is also very heavily associated with education and becoming a student. Now, unlike the third house, which is very applied technical learning, fifth house is more in that realm of higher education. Another meaning that the fifth house has is romance and love affairs, which traditionally means the period of time when the relationship is new and people are still dating before they get married. However, if the fifth house is heavily afflicted or it is associated with the 8th or the 12th house, then the fifth house can also indicate extramarital love affairs. Being a trine house, the fifth house is considered one of the best houses in the birth chart, which is why when planets are placed here, they typically have a very solid and fruitful ground to flourish. One of the classical meanings of the fifth house that is often given in the Hindu spiritual scriptures are spiritual rituals like chanting mantras and what is referred to as Purva Punya, or past life merit. Purva Punya is the factor and kind of like a measure of a good karma that you have accumulated in your previous lifetimes that you have brought with you into this one. And this Purva Punya is what can very heavily influence your life experience to be highly positive in this lifetime. Moving on to the sixth house, one of the less glamorous houses of the birth chart. It is most commonly known as the house of enemies, death, and disease. It can signify many things that are related to these three meanings. For example, people with a strong or a very dominant sixth house can excel in areas where they have to fight a lot of enemies, like competitive sports or competitive types of industries, legal court and litigation, or people who participate in a wide variety of contests or pageants. So all that said, any area that has a lot of competition. This is a house that can show a person's illness, wound, or injury, and is therefore a house that can be very pronounced for doctors and other medical practitioners. The debt part here refers to credit, mortgage, or any obligations that you have, most specifically financial. It's worth noting that sixth house is related to the sixth zodiac sign, which is Virgo, and Virgo's themes of routine and service. Sixth house is a service to society house, and this is one of the houses that can indicate a person's employment, their work, their career, and if there are any planets placed in the sixth house, they can have an influence over the type of career that a person finds themselves in. This is also the house that inclines a person towards service industries, potentially becoming a service provider or being in government service. In any way, shape, or form, sixth house is one of the service to society houses. Lastly, sixth house meaning is routine, and it is really instrumental to help us build habits and carry through our activities with discipline and integrity. Sixth house is probably the least glamorous house of the entire birth chart, but its job is to make you do something routinely enough in order to be able to build a structure and foundation for all the other great things that you have. Being both a growth or upachaya house and a trick house, because of some of its more problematic meanings, it's best if malefic planets like Mars or Saturn find themselves in this house. Up next, we have seventh house. And this is the third foundational house of the birth chart. The main meaning of the seventh house is marriage and relationships. And seventh house also represents our spouse or life partner. Love and marriage are undeniably the main indicators of the seventh house. However, just like the seventh house zodiac sign counterpart Libra, it has more meanings than just love and relationships. It's important to think about the seventh house not just as a house for romantic relationships, but a house of interpersonal relationships in general. This is the house that shows our ability to build a relationship. Personal, professional, romantic, friendship, any kind of interpersonal relationships. It is also the house of popularity, and if there are notable connections between the first and the seventh houses, this can make a person extremely popular with a wide audience. Seventh house is also related to entrepreneurship and trade, and it can also signify foreign residences, foreigners, and a life away from home. If you don't have any planets in the seventh house, this doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to get married or that you won't have relationships. There's a different set of criteria that allows us to evaluate this area of life, some of which we're going to be covering in the later videos of this series. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to do so now, not to miss upcoming videos. Now let's move on to the eighth house. This is the house that is most often misunderstood and even feared, which is very similar to its zodiac sign counterpart, Scorpio. Eighth house is related to all things occult, mystical, and secretive. If you are here, chances are you have some notable placements in the eighth house, as this is one of the indicators that inclines a person toward learning about things like astrology, tarot, and other mystical, magical, or esoteric type of things. A very strong eighth house can even gift a person with special mystical abilities called siddhi, although this is extremely rare. More commonly, people who have a very dominant and a very expressed eighth house in their birth chart can say that they have a heightened sense of intuition, and they're usually very good at being intuitively in touch with the world and sensing danger. Overall, the 8th house is not an easy place of the birth chart to navigate, with it being one of the trick or problematic houses. 8th house is the house of the mystical experiences, of the transformations, unprecedented events, unexpected changes, things that can break your life into a before and after. It is sometimes referred to as the house of death, but mostly in the metaphorical sense, where you go through an experience that changes you so profoundly that a version of you that existed before is dead, but the point is you are reborn and transformed into an evolved version of yourself. In the context of physical death, it would be more accurate to say that 8th house is the house of longevity and lifespan, more than the act of the physical death itself. 8th house can bring experiences that are completely outside of your control, that profoundly change who you are and shake up and even destroy the foundation of your life. They force you to change, evolve, transform, adapt. This is highly uncomfortable for most people because such experiences can usually knock you off your feet. This is one of the reasons why 8th house typically has this really bad reputation in astrology. Also, when the 8th house is affiliated with the 1st house in the birth chart, this can show a person who has a tendency to self-destruction, for example, through substance abuse, or who can exhibit other self-sabotaging behaviors. 8th house shows the darkest side of us, and it can interest a person in very deep and dark and even taboo subjects. Although most of the time we can experience it in a very benign way, being attracted to things like true crime documentaries, reading thrillers, reading gossip, political scandals, mysteries, conspiracy theories, and things like that. But there are some neutral and even positive 8th house meanings. One of them is spouse finances, inheritance, insurance payouts, and in general, other people's money. If a person has a very strong 8th house, it is likely that their life partner is somebody who is very well off and wealthy, and they may be able to inherit a large amount or somehow get a large amount of money without having to actually work for it, even sometimes in a very unlikely and crazy way, like winning a lottery. 8th house is the house with an incredible amount of depth, and it is often dominant or strong in the charts of people who are investigators, researchers, and scientists, people who want to get deep down to the bottom of things, explore a subject, a topic, or solve a mystery. Last but not least, 8th house is also a house of sexual experience and can give you an insight into this part of the person's life. Moving on to the 9th house, the meanings of which offer a very stark contrast to the meanings of the previously discussed 8th house. 9th house is widely considered the best house in the entire birth chart and the lightest and brightest part of us. 9th house meanings include this concept of dharma, which is our righteousness and our drive and desire to do the right thing. 9th house meanings are highly relevant to the meanings of the 9th zodiac sign Sagittarius and include things like luck, higher education, foreign travel, law and ethics, religion, fortune, and spiritual inclinations. 9th house also shows our father or father figure and also signifies mentors, teachers, and traditionally guru. For those of you who are part of other religional confessions, this can signify figures like priests or rabbis. Now let's talk about the 10th house, the last foundational house of the birth chart and the last angle, which represents our career and social status. All of the 10th house meanings revolve around the idea of career and social status and include things like ambition, achievements, and reputation. In the broader sense, 10th house is what we do with our time on Earth, good and bad. You'll find that these very heavily career-oriented meanings are very similar to the meanings of the 10th zodiac sign, Capricorn. Studying this house, its lord, influence, and combinations that it gets will give us an idea about how successful a person might be in their career, what their chosen career type might be, whether they're more suitable for self-employment or working for someone. People-wise, this is the house that indicates figures of authority like your bosses or your manager. Next up is 11th house, and this is another house of money. But the money from the 11th house is more profits, earnings, bonuses, and other type of material gains. This is the house of recognition, awards, titles and honors. If the 10th house is the work that we do, then 11th house is the recognition that we get for all the work that we have done. Like the 11th zodiac sign Aquarius, 11th house is a highly social part of the birth chart. Some of the 11th house meanings include friends, social circle, and interestingly, elder brothers and sisters. What this also tells us is that the 11th house people in our life are people who have more influence, who may be in a slightly elder or higher position to us in regards to our status. These are our influential friends and powerful contacts. 11th house is the last upachaya or growth house, because to unlock all of these wonderful rewards and to get to the point where you fulfill your desires, you have to pay your dues by getting the work done. Planets that tend to do exceptionally well here are Sun and Mars. Let's look at the 12th house of the birth chart. Being at the end of the chart, this house is very symbolic of endings. This is the house that is associated with transitional states, ending of one phase and start of another. Endings also mean losses, and 12th house is primarily known as the house of losses, notably financial losses and expenses. 12th house meanings take a person far from material life affairs. 12th house brings distance, sometimes periods of solitude and introspection. It is related to places of confinement that can put physical distance between a person and their life. These are places like hospitals, prisons, jail, correctional institutions, and penitentiaries. 12th house can also signify very long distance travel, like travel between continents. And this is one of the houses of immigration. 12th house also has a lot of spiritual meanings, as it is considered the house of spiritual liberation. And it is often very strong for people who are spiritual practitioners and inclines them towards spiritual pursuits like yoga, meditation, and even renunciation. 12th house is also related to sleep and bed chambers, as well as sex life. It is similar to the 8th house in that it is also a deep well of a house that covers a lot of secrets and mysteries. Like the 12th sign Pisces, the 12th house has this deep intuitive connection to the world, universal truth and wisdom, as well as collective unconscious. So for this reason, people who have a very active 12th house can almost function in this universe radio kind of way. They can have very vivid dreams, get visions, flashes of recognition, or moments when they just know something. Some of the 12th house experiences, like prison or confinement, can be extremely problematic, which is why 12th house is considered one of the trick houses. Now, this is it for the foundational elements of the birth chart. Now that we reviewed the planets, zodiac signs, and the houses of the birth chart, at this point, you can start building interpretations, combining the meanings of the houses, planets, and zodiac signs together like Lego building blocks. In the next video that I'm going to publish, I am going to show how I blend these meanings into interpretations using some birth chart examples for you to follow along. In the meantime, feel free to practice your own interpretations and be sure to drop them in the comments. Thank you for watching.